Welcome to the checklist panel discussion on the government announced policy of quasi-safe zones for public sector workers. We have a very distinguished panel with us. We have Mr. Michael Anisette, who is representing NATUC. We have the Letitia Cox, who is the second vice president of the Trinidad and Tobago Registered Nurses Association. We have Mr. Gary Aboud from Fishermen and Friends of the Sea. We have MP Rudranath Indar Singh, who is a UNC spokesperson for labor. And we have Mr. Brian Baig, an attorney at law, who has also expressed very strong views on this matter of the proposed public sector safe zones. I want to start off by making it very clear that although this panel discussion is being organized by the Checklist, which is the official newspaper of the opposition party, this is all the participants here are here in their independent capacities, and they are not making any political endorsements or statements here. What they are doing is accepting our invitation for us to listen to their points of view on this very, very critical issue that is really threatening the livelihoods of thousands and thousands of workers throughout the country. And they have come out very strongly, the trade unions and civil society organizations, and we want to hear from them what their positions are. So with that, I want to thank all of you for coming and listening to us. I really look forward to this discussion. I want to start off by asking each of the panelists to give us and give the audience a sense of what your union or your organization's position is on the government's recently announced policy regarding public sector workers' safe zones. I'd like to invite Mr. Michael Anisette first. So can you please take the floor?
Okay, yeah. Pleasant good night to the panelists, fellow panelists, and those who are listening. Let me take the opportunity to wish each and every one of you the best for 2022. And obviously Trinidad and Tobago and the working class in Trinidad and Tobago, all the best public servants, dock workers, WASA workers, TNTech workers, daily rated workers, MTS workers, WASA workers, and I can go on PTSC workers. Stay strong, stay firm, stay focused, and victory will be ours. So having said that, let me start. What is a safe zone? By the definition of the government. But I first want to pronounce that if you go through the dictionary, you're going to see a safe zone talks about military areas where the UN may come in and make safe zones to allow for troops and other UN personnel to go to the battlefield uninterrupted. All right, that is the first thing that I want to put on the table. Having said that, the government did not engage the trade union movement on this question of making the public service and other state enterprises and other government entities quasi-safe zone. What is a quasi-safe zone? One has to ask ourselves that particular question in the context that did the safe zone that the government set up work? We in NATUC, based on our analysis, we are saying no. So if it didn't work, what will prompt the government to now talk about a quasi-safe zone in the context that they are now saying, listen, if you are not vaccinated, you will not be allowed to come to work. One, you will be followed, which is not one of our lexicon in our industrial relation language. And secondly, after a while, you will be dismissed. Not because you committed any crime, not because you breached the collective agreement, but because they determined as the government unilaterally that if you do not vaccinate, all right, that you will not be allowed to come into the government created safe zone. The question that the public must ask, and we must put out within the public mind, is whether or not a vaccinated person or unvaccinated people, person rather, given the science that is now revealing itself, where it has been established clearly and without doubt that you can be vaccinated, but the question of spreading the virus still arrives. Let me repeat it. This is not Michael Anisette or the trade union movement making that statement. All right, and then therefore, if you are vaccinated and the safety aspect that the government was relying on no longer exists, and as a vaccinated person, you can spread the COVID, how come we are talking about safe zones? And we have to ask ourselves that question. Another issue that I want to raise is what happened to those workers who, as we know, 95% of the population in Trinidad and Tobago was able to come out of the COVID. And therefore, their self-innate immune system has been developed, and they are better able than the vaccinated or the jab persons to withstand the variants, given how your body is structured to operate when you are self-immunized. And the question is, what happens to those thousands of workers who would have gone through that process and are self-immunized but haven't taken the jab? Because let me make it clear from a NATUC perspective, this is not a vaccine. Everyone who understands what is a vaccine will understand. When you have to take continuous booster shots over a 6 months period, and in some instances less than that, we are not talking about a vaccine. So, and therefore, the narrative by the government does not support the realities outside there. So the question of safe zones, which we believe is an introduction of apartheid in Trinidad and Tobago, is discriminatory and it segregates the population. And that is not our culture. So that question of a safe zone does not exist, because with taking the jab, you have the potential, and it has been proven, of still getting COVID. So this is discriminatory. This has no basis in logic. It has no basis in fact, and we see it within the trade union movement as just an effort by the government to force workers to take the jab for obvious reasons. So I will stop there and allow the other panelists to have their say.
All right, well, thanks very much. There's a lot that we can take off on there, but let's invite our second speaker to give her view on behalf of the Trinidad and Tobago Registered Nurses Association. I very much would like to hear from them as well, being frontline health workers on the scene. We have Ms. Letitia Cox. Can you please join us and let us know your position and your organization's position?
Well, good night, everyone. And thank you so very much on behalf of the Central Executive of the Trinidad and Tobago Registered Nurses Association, and by extension, the Nursing and Midwifery Fraternity, for allowing us to share our views on this so-called quasi-safe zone. And even before I give our position in terms of what we think about this safe zone being initiated within the healthcare setting, we cannot say it's a safe zone in terms of what the government has defined a safe zone to be. Because if you go to the restaurants and you go to the bars, they are claiming that the patrons and the persons the proprietors must be vaccinated. However, in a healthcare setting where they are demanding that the healthcare workers be vaccinated, the patients don't all come in as vaccinated persons, right? Mm-hmm. So that means that it is not really in their definition of a safe zone.
Correct.
Yes. So we have some concerns about that. But the association has been very clear. We came out very early. We sent out a notice to the public and our membership stating that while we are pro-vaccine, we believe in vaccines, we believe in the power of vaccines and what it can do. We believe that, yes, it can give an extra added protection to the person, but we do believe that you should have the choice. You should retain your ability to choose to have that vaccine. And why? We are guided by the World Health Organization. If you look at, they have a document, April 4th, it came out April 4th, 2021, stating that they do not believe mandatory vaccination should be instituted. It should be very, very last resort. Because you know what it happens? It erodes public trust and confidence. They say that, moral suasion and education should be the best way in order to encourage persons to accept the vaccine. And the health workers, such as nurses and midwives, have been vaccine shamed. We have been ridiculed. We have been buffed. And I'm talking about from the Minister of Health, from the Prime Minister. And we believe that this is very disappointing. The nurses, and they are very disheartened because it's not only this situation we're looking at, we're also looking at how the government as a whole valued us. We are looking at how the other islands and the countries have appreciated their health workers, what Grenada, St. Kitts, Guyana, all these countries have done for healthcare workers. However, in Trinidad and Tobago, here we are being forced. And if you look at the percentage in terms of vaccination, you would see healthcare workers are higher than all the other services. Nurses was just over 65% in November, and I believe it may be higher by now. And we are thinking that if you did more in terms of specific education and moral suasion, they would have gotten to the point where they wanted the nurses and midwives to be. With respect to the second question in terms of they're saying that we are unpatriotic or, we are not supporting. Look at all these persons are dying. And yes, we are seeing the persons dying. We are there on the front line. We are the persons who are receiving the patient. But we want to say that this influx of patients has a direct relation and correlation to the destruction of the community health care service within our country. We are under-resourced in the community. If anybody knows about community health care, it deals with prevention and health promotion. Right now, we don't have sufficient staffing. They actually starved the training for those community health workers. The RHAs have been reluctant to send persons to train. It's very minute. Community nurses go out to train and they send very little. So they were already under-resourced. So now you have little to no persons to help with calling persons who have been infected, monitoring them, ensuring that you do proper contact tracing to ensure that persons who have been in contact with an infected person are contacted and ensure that they are quarantined. What we also have is a breakdown in terms of persons getting healthcare on time. So many persons are dying because they are not getting the intervention on time because we have been under-resourced even before the pandemic. So it's a situation where the regional health authorities are not managing their resources properly. And their hiring practices, their contracts that they are giving to their health workers, it is poor and leaves little to be desired. Right now, both nurses, midwives, and doctors are on temporary and short-term contracts. Is that value? And the last question, what are some solutions? And I would have highlighted some of them, earlier.
Well, actually, before we get to the last question, can we just a round robin with everybody
Let
on
the others.
the other two. Yeah, yeah.
No problem. No
Because
problem.
we definitely want to
Yes.
hear what the nurses have to say about the solution.
Sure.
So yeah.
No problem.
But you know,
Yes.
there are a couple of questions before we go to the next panelist that I wanted to ask, which is, I thought I saw either the Prime Minister or the AG talk about the rate of vaccination among the nurses under 50%. Is that correct or not?
That's incorrect, because we started off early in 2021 at 45%.
But was that the figure they had, or am I remembering it wrong?
The 65% was the most recent figure they would have announced, and that was in about November. Yeah.
All right, and that's what the Prime Minister said in December. Yes. Okay, because I remember he gave a whole list of figures. And
the overall figure, 65%, represent all the nurses and all the RHAs. Now, different RHAs had different percentages. We had Southwest, I think they were higher percentage, maybe in the 80s or so. We had Northwest, I think, was 45%. And, you know, I think it was around there. So different regional health authorities had different percentage when you disaggregate it. But as a whole, we were just over 65%, and I believe in November. Yeah.
Right, right. And then, do you have any comment? You don't have to go into it too much or whatever, but on what the Michael Annie said from NATUC had said about NATUC's position about the vaccine, that this is not yet a vaccine. Do you all have any position on that as the TTRNA?
Well, as a nurse, and what we are trained to do, we deal with evidence-based nursing, and we look at the research that has been done, and we looked at the World Health Organization in terms of making a vaccine mandatory. They say look at the efficacy, and they went into detail in terms of the effectiveness, how long the vaccine lasts. So there is some merit in what my comrade is saying, in that there is that need for booster shots ever so often, and you know, some shorter than others. So it's not like our old vaccines. I think they're still working on it. Right. So it should not be mandated as guided by the World Health Organization. But I wouldn't want to throw it out altogether, because it's all that they have right now. But it should be that person's individual choice to choose if they want to accept the vaccine or not.
Okay, that's excellent. And finally, I want to follow up on a point you had raised too about the respect to the nurses and the lack of respect that's being showed right now in terms of the contract. There was a recent story in the newspaper about, I can't remember the number, but it was, I think, in the thousands of nurses seeking to go 100. Abroad. It was 100. Okay, I couldn't remember. Yeah.
It's 100. Go ahead.
Yeah, could you elaborate on that for us?
Right. So there are 100 nurses, and that's approximate, and I believe we underestimated the numbers because we only took figures or estimates from certain departments within the various RHAs. So these nurses would have made the decision to migrate because the terms and conditions that are being offered here in Trinidad and Tobago leaves little to be desired. You cannot go and get a mortgage with a 1-year temporary contract. You cannot go to get a mortgage with a 6 months contract. Yes, you have no job security. So the nurses are also complaining that they are not getting promotional opportunities. Even when they go and they do their additional programs, it takes them 10 years. Sometimes when they're close to retirement, they are now getting an opportunity to probably be a supervisor or a head nurse. It's very frustrating. And then when you do get that position, it's only about a $200 or $500 from what you would normally get. So you know, when you look at the other essential services like the police and the army, they get allotment of housing. Nurses get nothing. Do you know that the nurse here gets a living out allowance of $100? That's what they get towards housing and renting an apartment, $100. You can't even rent a doghouse with $100. Please, we cannot do that, right? So the value and respect for healthcare workers, it's out the door. One other thing I would want to add, a nurse contacted me yesterday and told me NCRHE, the HR department, contacted her and told her they are not renewing her contract because she is unvaccinated. And she has been working with them since 2016. Is that value? They're scraping to get staff when the day comes, but you're sending home your staff that's saving lives. That can't be value. Nope.
All right, well, thanks for that. Well, that's very important information. At this point, I want to invite the MP for Couva South and the UNC spokesperson for Labour, Rudranath Indar Singh. You made a very important and hard-hitting press release today. Can you give us your comments, please?
Thank you very much, PRO, Dr. Kirk-Mego, and of course to all of my fellow panelists here tonight. Let me say from the outset, our position has been very clear on this particular issue and other issues that has impacted upon the rights of workers over the last 6 years, and in terms of where we are from a political point of view, because the UNC is a party that is steeped in labor. It is steeped in advocating for the peace, bread, and justice and fair play in our society. And we have always stood on the side of the labor movement and the workers of Trinidad and Tobago. And we are on record through our political leader, the Honorable Kamala Persad-Bissessar, who has insisted that we are in support of vaccination, but it must not be mandatory to the point where it is unconstitutional in terms of especially Section 4 of the Constitution of Trinidad and Tobago, and also taking into consideration from a collective bargaining point of view, terms and conditions of employment. We see it as an abuse, of a flagrant abuse of the collective bargaining process, and especially the collective bargaining process has been outlined under, or is guided in terms of its day-to-day operation under the Industrial Relations Act of Trinidad and Tobago. And I think that a fundamental question has to be answered by the Prime Minister and the Attorney General. Has a quasi-safe zone really has it been legally defined? And has this been effectively communicated with public servants and workers throughout Trinidad and Tobago? And I say so in terms of the communication because public servants, whether it is from a healthcare point of view or medical frontline workers, public servants, in the context of local government, daily rated workers, monthly paid, and so on, even law enforcement, they are represented by a cross-section of the labor movement, whether it is the Public Services Association, whether it is the Trinidad and Tobago Registered Nurses Association, and in the context of state entities, Comrade Annie said, could be me out here also. For example, the Seamen and Waterfront Workers Trade Union, they represent workers within the Port Authority of Trinidad and Tobago. So that we have to ask the question, has there been consultation and agreement? Because if you want to implement this, you should have a memorandum of agreement or understanding signed with the recognized majority unions. And up till today, I don't think that the Minister of Labor or the Minister of Planning, for example, or the Attorney General has said we have met with the labor movement in terms of the recognized majority union. And today we could tell Trinidad and Tobago that there is a memorandum of agreement that will be registered at the industrial court to say we have an agreement on this particular issue. And we have to also ask the question, will there be an adjustment in terms of will all new vacancies be advertised with a vaccination requirement? Will promotions now be based on a vaccination requirement and so on? And the president of the industrial court has been very clear on this particular issue that an employer cannot unilaterally, single-handedly change the terms and conditions of employment without the agreement of the recognized majority union. And also, I want to make it very clear, because I think that the workers have to report to work, and they must demand from their permanent secretaries, they must demand from their heads of department, if I am reporting for duty and I have not infringed on anything that I'm subjected to any disciplinary action, why I am being debarred from entering my workplace. And I think that they need to engage in some kind of, as I term, civil disobedience to get the employer's position in writing, so that they could be communicated what they have done wrong or what they have infringed.
And I think this ties into your point that the quasi-safe zone has not been legally defined, and the public sector has not been declared a safe zone. And then what is the process of legally declaring a place a safe zone and so forth? So by forcing the heads of departments and permanent secretaries to put it in writing, I think that's a very, very important call to action there.
And in addition to this, I think that the Minister of Health is fast and out of place, to the point where he has said that he is in possession of fake vaccination cards that have been procured by public servants. And if the Minister of Health cannot pass on this information that he's in possession of to the Commissioner of Police for investigation, I think he owes an apology to all public servants in terms of impugning their character and integrity. And then he went off on another wild red herring and distraction that ivermectin is being used and it is causing deaths and so on within homes and so. If he has the evidence, get this, bring it out in the public. Don't attempt to instill fear and anxiety and create apprehension and so on. And I think this is where the government has been falling down. The minister, instead of trying to address the high rates and infections and reduce the vaccine apprehension, fear and anxiety, this is a minister that promised Trinidad and Tobago community engagement in terms of the vaccination rollout process. We all live in respective communities, and I cannot say, for example, I'm saying it in the context of the constituency of Cuba South, and I'm sure all my colleagues who are in this panel, not from a political point of view, but you all exist within communities. And I challenge the minister to say that he has had his staff through the Ministry of Health go with mobile units and so on, education personnel, whether from a medical point of view, and hold what we may term community caravans and with community centers, work with village councils and so on, that could reflect that, yes, community engagement has been explored to the hilt. And as a result of this now, we are going in the direction, because Comrade Letitia Cox from the TTRNA has indicated that from an education and a sensitization point of view, this is of paramount importance. And the World Health Organization has said very clear that mandatory vaccination must be a last resort. And this is a minister who has been espousing WHO protocols from day one. And he said that ivermectin cannot be used because it is not in conformity with the protocols of the WHO. So this is fork tongue, this is propaganda, this is conmanship, this is deceit of the highest order. And that is why I will tell the Prime Minister that this creation of a quasi-safe zone must be seen in the context of mandatory and forced vaccination. It is not the creation of any safe zone. And that is why I continue to say that the Prime Minister is leading with the highest degree of conmanship and deceit and propaganda. I will rest what I have to say in terms of that disjuncture. Thanks
very much, MP. And I just want to invite Brian Baig quickly to speak about some of the legal implications. I know you've been very vocal on this matter. So if you could just briefly tell us some of the legal issues that you've been dealing with on the quasi-safe zones for public sector workers.
Yes, a pleasant good night to you, Dr. Kuku, Public Relations Officer of the United National Congress. A pleasant good night to all members of this panel. I feel honored to be here amongst great fighters for the people in both labor as well as in the social sector and in the health sector. We must understand that this is not the first time the Prime Minister, vis-a-vis the government, has spoken on mandatory vaccines. The Prime Minister actually started this conversation in July of 2021, when he came out in those press conferences that he holds on a Saturday. And he did talk about the idea of mandatory vaccines. And I want to remind not only members of this panel, but who will be seeing this, is that there's something called the Constitution of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, which was spoken a little earlier by one of our panelists, which I will go a little further to state. Not only Section 4, you have Section 4, 5, and 6 together. These are the fundamental rights of our citizens in Trinidad and Tobago, where you have the rights of choice, the rights to choose. And a person still has the right to choose if they want to take a vaccine or not, whether it is an experimental drug or a full-fledged vaccine. We must understand that by you doing this, you are now compromising citizens to have to now make a choice. Then now you're now making them understand, but I don't have a choice no more. And that is wrong by any government to do that. There's also the OSHA Act, where there's the Occupational Safety and Health Act, that also you are now causing citizens or workers now rather to now figure, well, are they going to be affected at work? And that is wrong too. The OSHA Act is also quite clear that it comes in with the whole issue where they're saying workers have to present a PCR test. The OSHA Act is quite clear that it says it is the responsibility of the employer to cover the PCR test, not the worker. And I'm open to be challenged by anyone, because I have been dealing with that of late. Just today in my office, a gentleman came from a private sector, and now they want to use what the Prime Minister is saying.
And how much does the PCR test cost that the workers you were dealing with have to pay?
It's different prices on what I've been hearing. Yeah. And even when you go to the private hospitals, persons have to will be paid £1 and a crown.
Yeah, I'm hearing it's like $1,100, $1,500 a test.
I heard in one place it was $1,500. That's why I don't want to pronounce on a cost when there's been varied in costs. And that's what I'm saying today. I had a worker came to my office, and what the Prime Minister has caused is that this is what was meant for the public sector. The private sector now wants to jump in it and use it as in creating themselves safe zones. And I want to agree with my colleagues here and there in this panel that there is no proper legal definition of a safe zone. In that, a safe zone, and I believe it was Comrade Anisette who made a mention that the only safe zones that is seen in definition deals with that in times of war or military conflict, wherein that in those safe zones you are able to pass without any form of attacks upon you. Safe zones was created in Iraq during the Iraq War, in northern Iraq as well as in southern Iraq, for way in which there were military bases created. So is that what this government is looking to do? It's ridiculous. The Prime Minister must also understand by what he has done, he has also not going to compromise what is called medical confidentiality, where I've had to tell persons, you do not give up your medical information because that is private and confidential, and the right of privacy is under the Constitution again, sections 4, 5, and 6. And a government must never, ever trample on fundamental rights. We have also
And
money here.
in addition to the fundamental rights in 4, 5, and 6, is it also explicitly catered for in the Data Protection Act as well? Am I right in thinking that?
There is that as well under the Data Protection Act, but I am more looking at the constitutional.
It's a fundamental right, even more than that.
And I am telling you that lawyers, colleagues who I have, we are gearing up to prepare to fight because there are a lot of industrial relations issues, and unions has to be ready to fight as well, and lawyers are prepared to fight with unions. And I will close with this, is that we have a colleague from the TTRNA who's here, and I want to tell you what happened in France, where the French government passed a law to make it mandatory for the French health workers to be vaccinated, make it mandatory. Every French health worker hit the streets for not 1 day, not 2 days, for 3 days, abandoned the hospitals and hit the streets. Eventually it led to the French government repealing such a decision, because you cannot force people who are trying to save lives to make them understand, well, you have to do this too, when they have been doing it. And then you have just to finalize this, you have a prime minister who came out and who said, you know, the frontline workers, we must thank them, we must praise them. And now look what you're doing to frontline workers, public servants. You have a single mother who has 4 children. You're now making her to do mandatory vaccines, and she doesn't want to do it, but then don't come to work. So she loses out with finances. She can't take care of her children, and she's a single mother. That is something that I call dictatorial tactics. I will go further in some things that was said by Comrade Anisette with the issue of apartheid. But there's some more in our history we must remember. Thank you.
All right, good. Well, thanks for that. And finally, I would invite Gary Aboud from Fishermen and Friends of the Sea to express his point of view on this government's declaration of quasi-safe zones for public sector workers. Gary? Hello, Gary? Can you hear me? Let's see. Gary, can you hear me?
Okay, wait, I can't hear you. Wait.
Okay.
Okay, 1 second. Okay, I can hear you. You want me to go ahead?
Okay. Yes, please.
I could hardly hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you fine.
Something's wrong with my volume. You can hear me. Okay.
Yes.
Well, thank you for having us. Everybody knows that we are apolitical. I appreciate the invitation, and I admire the leaders who are speaking out here today. I hope that the enthusiasm with which I heard what you had to say is shared, because we all share the same story, and it's very rare that we are able to bring anything new to it because we take the time to find out. We don't let people make decisions for us. All of the anti-vaxxers or the vaccine hesitant or the persons who are skeptical about the agenda behind the production and dissemination of the vaccine share in common one thing: inquisitive. We don't like people to tell us what to do without us having a fair right of consent. So why I'm saying that is because I have 5 pages of notes, but the last thing on my notes is that the court will take too long. It has to go before the lower court. There are all kinds of delay mechanisms. Michael, they will drag this thing to the Privy Council. It'll take 3 years to get there if it's fast. 2 years. You can't afford for the government to lock out everybody for 2 years. So the attorneys have to find a weakness in the position that they could file an injunction based on a string of events that will support it, not one event. That's my respectful view. So that's the last thing I will say. Working my way backwards, safe zones is nonsense. The vaccine injected are getting the sickness, and in my personal experience, are as sick or more sick. They argue, well, we don't die. Well, my mother died, and she took the vaccine, all of them. And I know other people that died. So don't tell me that they don't die when they get COVID. But of course, my mother's classification wasn't died from COVID, that from heart failure, blood clot. That's different. But it's one of the recorded suspicions of the 60,000 doctors who wrote to the CDC inquiring, requesting answers. The data is being incorrectly collected. I'm on a chat group with Roger Hussein and a lot of pretty smarter people than me, and a lot of statisticians, and nobody disagrees. 90% don't give a damn about people's right to their bodies, the right to choose, the right for everything that has been fought for our individual personal respect and independence from 500 years ago till now. From the beginning of, even all the way back to the Romans, this sense of the right, our intrinsic right. And the United Nations has taken it forward so that we could have a convention that says what is common sense. But over and over, my second to last note is that the Prime Minister has spoken. So when we talk about constitutional reform and about the problem, the failure of our national model of governance to work, it's not just the procurement and the inflating everything, including medical supplies, which conveniently they left out from the procurement bill. So they could be paying $200 for a single shot, US. And we can't tell, we can't know, and everybody along the way got a little grease. And I'm not asking you. I'm not asking you. I've been locked out of government supply because I refuse to play the game. They could follow me, record me. That is the truth. Let him lock me up for that too. I don't give a flying. The Prime Minister has spoken in a constitution that allows him to be a dictator. And we have not pursued the agenda of, it's been talked about since we had the owner of IFE. That's Mr. Robinson. That's the second major arrogant failure. But a government that could have passed all the laws with 33-3, all the most constructive laws, and Mr. Smart did not pass one. Not one. And then Robinson to go to Africa and come back as he's some royal prince when people suffering from all kind of wage cuts and mismanagement and all kind of non-sustainable activity, failed economies, oil and gas blown out the window with all kinds of foolishness, and people left to suffer. People have to work for decades, have to negotiate to get a 6% increase. For God's sake, the absence of a merit system, the absence of conviction, no accountability, nowhere. But you could thief. You could thief anyhow you want, and the government will protect you. So, Mr. Robinson, same insensitivity and arrogance and lack of humility that we have today. Carelessness, freeing up $1 million budget to buying personal cars and all kinds of bacchanal, and people on the ground in the communities that support you with their blood and sweat. They can't get to talk to you. And if lucky, they'll get a little grease hand to do something wrong, to demoralize and weaken them and leave out 9 out of 10. So, do we have safe zones? There's nonsense, foolishness that doesn't follow science. That's Fauci nonsense, so that he could get more royalties from all the patterns that he has lined up. And Michael, why is the Food and Drug Administration, which gave an approval of one of the vaccines already, why is it that they're unwilling to share the data of the trials? Why is it, what's so confidential about that? A matter of such international concern. Now you want to persecute and lock people in to starve them out. If you don't come out, they'll burn down the house. What is that? And you're telling me about court to take 2 years to get a judgment when plenty judges on my chat group. I don't know any judges that understand the science. They're not reading it. They're busy. They don't come from a scientific background. They're from languages and history. Ask any lawyer. How many of them understand science? How many of them study chemistry and biology and understand when a doctor A doctorate dissertation is submitted, a peer-reviewed study. Do they understand it? They discount it as Donald Trump, who I don't support. As a person, I don't support him. And as a politician, I don't support the Republican Party. But they're the ones who started out with this whole question of, hey, watch out now, there's something going on fishy here. Why did Fauci transfer 60 million US to a Chinese laboratory to where the virus came from? What even is the truth about the idea that they're engineering viruses for biological experimentation? Do you think they wouldn't tell us about UFOs that landed in Nevada, but they go tell us about experimentation of unusual human response mechanisms, unknown response mechanisms? Ask yourself the question, how did dengue arrive here in the way that it did overnight throughout the Caribbean? A bird carried it? There is a lot more to the reasonable truth of science than is being said by these jackass politicians who today could come out and say that ivermectin gonna kill you, when the World Health Organization themselves, over 1 billion dosages of ivermectin have been administered on the planet. It's one of the safest, lowest side effect drugs of all the drugs that WHO approved. But this minister don't read that. How could I, with all my other responsibilities, where this is not my core, have taken the time to find that out? But they tell me about safe zones. I think, with the greatest of respect to everyone here, this is a time for us all to lay down our divisions, our hurts, our past.
So let me ask you all to jump in. I think you've been muted. So please unmute yourselves to answer those questions. But the critics who say it's unpatriotic, the people in the ICU are 90% are unvaccinated. So we need to have this mandatory vax. So how to address the critics, and then what are your alternative solutions as well to deal with this pandemic about lives and livelihoods, because that is both important. So anybody, Michael, Anisette, Letitia, especially from the nurses' perspective, I know you're going to start in on that. Let me invite you first, since I had cut you off last time when you were going to start. So I'll invite you first, Letitia, but anybody can jump in freely after. Could you unmute yourself, please? I think I had muted all.
I think I would have already expressed the unpatriotic part, and I was going into the solutions. And I would want to the new Secretary for Health, Dr. Faith B. Israel, at Tobago. I've listened to her in her recent comments that she would have made, and her intent in terms of her approach to healthcare and dealing with the COVID pandemic. And I would like to outline some things that I believe we mirror, we understand, and we believe this will also help. She stated that they wanted to increase testing capacity through the acquisition of rapid test kits. And I'm thinking rapid test kits that is economically able, the average citizen is able to purchase it, because we are hearing this conversation now. I believe the Minister of Health is now starting to talk about having home test kits for this average citizen to be able to test themselves so they can know their status. And it is very important to increase testing so you know your status, so that you can take the necessary precautions to protect not only yourself, but your family members, but others, to know that you have to self-quarantine, you have to stay away, and so on. And we believe that that increased testing, making it affordable, ensuring that there's this PCR test, as you talk about the price, $950, $1,200, $1,500, that's the kind of price we're looking at for PCR tests. Yeah, it's very expensive. So we need to have testing kits so persons will be able to check their status. She also mentioned improving manpower to make contact tracing more efficient. And that ties into community healthcare. Right. You need to have proper contact tracing, and contact tracing involves tracking those persons who would have been in contact with that person who was positive. Right now, there's a breakdown in the community. It's not happening. People, they're not checking to see who the persons were in contact with, like as they did in the earlys. They used to do it in the earlys, but that has stopped. Now it's if your family there, they're not even testing the other family members. They say once you positive, then everybody else stay in quarantine the same time as you, and they're saying that you're automatically released now after a certain period. So there's no testing to see if the person is still, able to transmit, or they're still symptomatic and so on. These things are crazy, right? So this needs to be dealt with, empowering our contact tracing in the community. She also talked about improving ICU treatment capacity and increasing the vaccination through public education and moral suasion. And we believe in it. And one of the things that I've always stressed in my interviews is that you cannot use a broad brush for everybody. There are different groups in society. You have to speak their language. There's a language that the protective services will speak. There's a language that healthcare workers will speak. If they want to sell the vaccine, they need to speak to them in their language, and their campaign must be group specific. So there needs to be education. You cannot, and we will go once again with the World Health Organization, efficacy, efficiency. You cannot mandate something that is still under some level of trial. People must agree. People must consent to it. And in my closing remarks, we cannot be heroes and heroines and think that you're vaccinated so you can't get infected and you can't die. I am triple vaccinated. I have been vaccinated, and also I had my booster, but I'm not running out there without my mask. I don't have crowds. I love my home right now. My home is my place, right? So we need to take all the necessary protocols, wash your hands, hygiene practices, social distancing. We know that this disease, this illness, it's a social disease. It breeds in interaction. So you need to curtail. Life is not as the same as it was before in order to stop the spread. Yes? So that's my comments regarding solutions.
Thank you very much. And let me invite you, Michael, because I'm not sure if it was NATUC that had asked the Attorney General for evidence, and then the Attorney General said there's no evidence, but there's 90% of the people in the ICU who are not fully vaccinated. I'm not sure. I don't think he said unvaccinated. He said not fully vaccinated. And then so he was throwing it back to the union movement and criticizing the union movement for that. So would you want to respond to that? If it was indeed your question, I'm not fully clear on that. So you could correct me if I have remembered that wrong. I have you on mute. If you could please unmute yourself, Michael. Hello? Oh. We're not hearing you.
Good.
Yeah, good.
You hear me?
Hearing you now. Yeah.
All right. We are driven. Let me repeat what I said. We have made it clear in the public domain that we in NATUC, we are not doctors, healthcare providers, scientists in any form, shape, or fashion. But we are driven by common sense, down-to-earth reality, and what is happening. Because we see the truth as absolute, and no matter how you try to twist and turn, the truth will always remain the truth.
Correct.
And having said that, our questions, it is driven by our membership and the kinds of information that they will bring to us. And you will be surprised of how many members would have stated to NATUC that their father or grandfather, mother, went into the hospital for a particular specific ailment and they got swabbed. And if that swab would have shown that they have COVID, the death certificates would have said COVID death. And we believe that was misleading. We believe that was false. We believe that was unethical. We believe that was a misrepresentation of the facts as it relates to the true definition of what is a COVID death. And therefore, the figures will get inflated if you put everybody together. And what that will do, it will cause panic and fear within the public minds. And we were wondering, as professionals, meaning from the CMO and that department and the government, whether that was deliberate. As we made the point in NATUC, there was 34 deaths pre-COVID, and the 34 deaths used to be disaggregated. Why it is that in a COVID pandemic period that measure was not used? It is not that the professionals are not aware of the disaggregation of death in the context of what someone really died from. All right, and people going into hospital with COVID, and they go into hospital for COVID. So we have to make that distinction. And our press release was not answered by the CEO, by the CMO rather. As a matter of fact, he complicated the issue more and confirmed our suspicion in the context of not really making the distinctions in the context of who absolutely died from COVID as opposed to those who may have had underlying issues but were swapped. Because I will make the point, 95% of the population who had COVID was able to get it over. And then you see a lot of people in Trinidad do not pay attention to facts. They do not disaggregate, they do not analyze, they do not assess what is happening and do the critical analysis. Because one must remember that before the rollout of the jab, and I deliberately use the word the jab because I am maintaining this is not a vaccine. As a matter of fact, the definition of a vaccine was changed in order to accommodate the running off and rolling off of these different so-called vaccines. So we have to understand that. But the point that I think that is necessary that we make within the public domain, we have to understand what are the facts. The public is part of this society, and facts mustn't be driven on the basis that the Prime Minister says so, the doctors say so. How many doctors have been wrong? How many prime ministers have been wrong? Right? How many human beings have been wrong? Because that is a natural evolution of being a human being. No man is omnipotent. No man is all powerful. No man is all knowing. And therefore, we will make mistakes. And a lot of mistakes has been made in Trinidad and Tobago. And the sister spoke about testing. I mean, that was in the public domain long before that. We are now talking about that after all these deaths. We are now talking about bringing kids to pre-test people. Right? How come? How come? Let us ask ourselves these fundamental questions. That was in the public domain. That was knowledgeable to the experts. And why it is we wasn't doing the pre-testing of our citizenry in order to determine their status, which would have given us a better chance of isolating and treating based on those tests. We are talking about 2 years after all these deaths, after all these cases, that you are now talking about that particular issue. And I'm not going to applaud anybody for that, right? Because that is too late. Too many people would have had to die, right, for us. And we must call a spade a spade. And that is the problem that we have in Trinidad and Tobago. We do not like to speak truth to power. And you were talking about the question of what are the solutions. And the solutions are outside there. There are a suite of other design. I want to put it in a way that our members can understand. a suite of other design treatment that has been used in other countries and in Trinidad and Tobago, whereby people with serious COVID would have been able to be treated by those doctors and they would have been able to overcome it. Why it is that we have to hold on to one measure? Why it is that we do not want to experiment? Because this jab is an experiment drug. So why it is if what's the name, the new drug that the minister and them condemned, and they said it was not approved by the World Health Organization or the CDC,
Ivermectin.
which is totally misleading, because that drug, the ivermectin, would have been on the market for more than 40 years. And doctors are using it not only in Trinidad, all over the world. I remember 8 doctors wrote the Ministry of Health in Jamaica expressing alarm that they are not using this when it can work.
Exactly.
And there's this big debate going on whether or not it is a virus or whether it is something else, because there is this study now going on in Hong Kong, not Hong Kong, sorry, Singapore, where they disbanded what the World Health Organization said, that you cannot do an autopsy on people who die from COVID, to discover it is a viral as opposed to what they was telling us. So they were misleading us. That came out in the Singapore paper, and there's not propaganda. You can check it when we are finished here. All right, and then I always ask that question in the public domain. Who determine on what basis that they say that if you die from COVID, that you cannot do an autopsy because of A, B, and C? Who determined that? And on what basis that was determined? Because if you want to find out what really caused the death of any individual, be it AIDS, be it whatever you want to call it, an autopsy is there to do that. So we are saying the lines are not drawn clear. We are not seeing the dots, and there is too much disinformation that results in what is happening. And I want to remind people, that this government went into the election on the basis that the Oxford School said that they were #1 in dealing with the pandemic. Let us not forget that. And let us not forget that when the Prime Minister opened up Tobago and he invited people to go in Tobago and have a good time, and they said 50,000 people went, but the Minister of Transport said that is misleading. Is 25 went and 25 come back. That is not the issue. The issue is that you open up Tobago and we started to see a particular behavior and spy, because you as the Prime Minister made that particular statement and no one raises that. So the point that we are making in the trade union is how you articulate your message, how you engage the community, how you engage the people who will be affected by your decision. All right, that is a fundamental principle of democracy. You are going to make a decision that is going to affect me, and you are telling me that I don't have a right to engage you to discuss how I feel, what I think, all right, which we call in the lexicon of industrial relation language, we call that social dialogue, for which this government is part of. The government is part of the ILO, 178 members. And that is
Right.
one of the fundamental principles of the ILO, the question of social dialogue. It's the only UN organization that has a tripartite mechanism. And what do I mean by that? Representatives from labor, government, and the business who sit around a table and build consensus, all right, in order to come up with recommendations and conventions as it relates to labor rights and policies. And it works well. in the ILO, the only UN body, because the ILO came out of the UN from World War I. So let us understand that there are areas outside there. I mean, I can raise a lot of issues.
Mhm.
How come that in Africa, where the question of taking the jab is so low, but the death rate is that low?
Yeah.
What is responsible for that? Are we not asking the question? There was a particular, I'm trying to remember the state in India who went through a
Uttar Pradesh.
particular
Yeah.
system of a suite of treatment without taking the jab. And they were able to cure the COVID in that particular state in India as opposed to the other states that was taking jab. Why haven't we studied that? Isn't the science a science where you look at all the information, all the facts, to come up with what is best suited in the given circumstances? Or is it that the science is driven by what people say? And I don't want to get too controversial, but when you have pharmaceutical companies financing and big financiers financing the CDC and the WHO, and we look at their behavior right internationally, one will begin to understand that when that kind of finance gets embedded into these organizations, there will be compromise, because the very same CDC and WHO would have changed the definition of vaccination in order to allow the jab to be given out to people. So those are not anisette views, and we must critically analyze it. We must dissect it. We must look at it, and we must come up with our solution. Is there an alternative to the jab? Yes, there is.
All right.
Yes,
Okay,
there is, and we must understand that in Trinidad and ask yourself the question, why it is that there is this pushback by the government for not allowing the alternatives treatment to be embedded into our system that has been saving lives in Trinidad and globally. So I will end it.
Yeah, I think those are very important points, because it's the government is on this bullying mission pulpit modus operandi, and you're not supposed to question and just and that is totally undemocratic, and it is not proper science either. So we want to try to close up, but I see Brian has his hand up. I know Gary had something he wanted to say, and perhaps I think MP Indar Singh probably might have a few things to say. But if we could just kind of have some brief closing statements, I'll give you all an opportunity. So Brian, you want to? I see you had your hand up.
Yes. You see, the point the question that you asked about the issue of criticizing this whole thing with the mandatory vaccines being unpatriotic, I would say the fact that you are trampling on the rights of citizens is unpatriotic. Because if that is allowed and if that happens, well, I will say like what I said to another media house, that I will ask many persons to join with me, and I'll take a copy of the Constitution and I'll burn it in front of the Hall of Justice, or maybe in front of the Red House, because you cannot come and do that. And I'm glad I heard Comrade Anisette talked about the issue of the apartheid system in South Africa. But I want to go a little back in history. 1939, September of 1939, there was something called the Great Invasion, when the National Socialist Party, better known as the Nazi government, invaded Poland. And with that, they brought some laws, not only into Poland, but also into Germany. And what such law that they did was that they made it mandatory that all Jews must wear the Star of David on their arm. So where do we stop there? Where do we stop with here? Where we're doing mandatory vaccines. What are we going to stop with that? What else? Are we going to mandate that all persons wear the color red? Are we going to mandate that all persons must walk on their heads? But the thing about it is that It is ridiculous for a government to come out and say that is unpatriotic to talk about it. Last time I checked, this is still a democratic country. And one of our rights as a democratic country is the freedom of speech and the freedom to express our views if something is wrong or drastically wrong. And to come and to tell the people that, we must never forget that it was a gentleman by the name of Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi, but it was as Mahatma Gandhi, where they made a law in South Africa that you must walk with a pass wherever you are going. You must walk with a pass. You know what he did with those passes? He burnt it in front of City Hall. He was arrested, of course, but when he said, he made it quite clear that you cannot stop me from doing something, and he burnt it. I commend persons who stood out, who protested. I understand some people were arrested for expressing their views. I mean, Mr. Aboud, you are one. I don't want to prejudice your matter, but I heard how your matter went, and as far as I'm concerned, your matter should have been dismissed on the first day. But anyway, that's another thing, another comment for another day. My thing is this, and I'll close with this, is that if we as citizens do not speak out, do not say anything about what is happening, then you have allowed a government to trample upon you, trample upon a constitution which persons didn't have to lose their lives for, but persons who fought and struggled to ensure that we have something called a constitution which binds our people, binds the laws of our country. Because we must remember that our laws must never ever go against our constitution. Hence why there's something called constitutional motions. If it means people have to walk the 12 steps of the fall of justice to let the courts tell us. I listened to another lawyer today on TV. Sometimes I just wonder what that gentleman's point of view is sometimes. But you have to come and say the courts have already made a decision. How can you say that people have not gone to the court? Right? The point is, and I'll say it again, you have a fundamental right. So what next? You're gonna make it mandatory that I must show you my whole health records after? Well, where does it stop, Dr. Medu? Where will it end? And I am saying, and I applaud my brothers in the unions. I came out of the trade union being with the NUGFW. Sometimes I wish I could be back in the unions. In fact, I'm maybe joining one very soon as an attorney for them. And I am saying here that everybody, whoever you are, lawyers, whoever, oh, by the way, Mr. Aboud, I did biology. Lawyers, doctors, whoever, even our unions, stand up and we have to push back on this. Because if they don't do this, where will it end? Because we have workers, because I'm Comrade Aniset, as well as Mr. Indar Singh will say it. And I'm going to finish now with it, is that you have some workers who are daily rated employees. I'm a former daily rated employee. You are telling workers, don't come to work. You have 3 days not to show, and you don't show up for 3 days. They can easily come and say, you abandon your job. You're sent home. You've lost your job. I have told 2 persons who came to my office today, go and go to work. Make them tell you go home. Get it in writing from your permanent secretary or from your CEO of the regional corporation and say, yes, you have to go home. Get it in writing. And I am saying here today that I am prepared and I will be fighting for workers if this truly comes about and people are sent home. Enough is enough. The nonsense has to stop now. Do not trample on our constitution and do not defeat and destroy a democracy of Trinidad and Tobago. Thank you.
All right, good, thanks. And let me invite Gary and Rudy if you have any closing remarks so we can finish up our discussion.
Well, very quickly, I mean, Comrade Aniset touched on the issue of social dialogue. And Trinidad and Tobago is a member of the International Labour Organization. We send delegations to the ILO annual conference and so on. And we are supposed to subscribe or subject or to be guided by the whole concept of social dialogue. And this lends or begs the question, because the Prime Minister and his Minister of Planning, they always boast about this National Tripartite Advisory Council, and it is supposed to bring labor, business, and government together in the interest of the well-being of the country. Was this particular issue placed before in a very responsible manner, where there was really meaningful dialogue, taking on board and at the end of the day, coming up with something that could be a win-win. And as we continue to explore, why is the government on a one-track course? Why is the government pursuing a collision course rather than displaying a willingness to engage, a willingness to listen, and probably tweak and get buy-in and move on? And I will continue to say, people may say I'm being irresponsible, but excuse me, history is rife with examples that civil disobedience in keeping with the peaceful protests and the laws of the country, you at times the mean justify the end in realizing what you want to achieve in terms of protecting human rights and the civil liberties of our society.
Absolutely, absolutely. I guess that leaves you, Gary, for any closing remarks as you finish up the discussion.
Closing, but I'm going to be as quick as possible, but I want to be clear. I accepted tonight's discussion, hoping that I'd be able to come out and speak in the early part. And forgive me when I say I didn't want to listen to the whole thing. I didn't want to hear everybody now because it's very painful for me and I get very angry. And I know a lot of you all have a much more calculating mind than I do, but I'm driven by passion. And when I get so angry, and each one of you that spoke before made me a little more angry. So now I have high blood pressure. I have to pretend I have the whole day to unwind. It's very upsetting that they should say that we are unpatriotic. The people talking here today are unpatriotic. Look at the people who are standing up. Look at the people who got locked up. The people I got locked up with, I would go back 100 times over with them. And I will join any of you that want to do anything that may cause us to end up in trouble, as long as our heart is pure, that we're doing it for everybody else, not for us. I want to say that they'll call us unpatriotic because we fight the procurement law, because they conveniently could be paying $60 US for a box when it costs in $3, or $10 for a mask when it costs in $2, and there's no control. So I am unpatriotic. I'm unpatriotic because we have no entrepreneurship grants. We're blowing money that they can't tell us where to spend any money, and I'm going to show you that in point number 12. But we have nothing to encourage young people to give them hope. People leaving, the bright ones going, educated people sending their children away. The same people, all the people in my chat group, all the top of the society, they're sending the children to live away. We who created it, all of us over 60 should take a bow of shame because we presided over it. And even though we fought, we failed because today we stand to lose everything. We're back in the apartheid. But I'm not a patriotic. People being dislocated. People can't pay rent. People having to go back home. Families splitting up. No money for this, that, and the other. A whole string of things happening. And I'm disturbed about it, but I am the unpatriotic one. More and more vagrants today in the paper. People living in their car in Trinidad. But I'm unpatriotic. I'm unpatriotic because rivers are closed, where we could go and get God-given sun and take in vitamins and relaxation and exercise and recreate with our loved ones. We locked up like pigeons in a coop. Just so. Where's the science? No science. But I am unpatriotic. People in Guadeloupe fighting for their lives against a military entity just like we have here. Are we going to fight for our lives? I don't mind, I don't mind. That is a noble way to stand up because posterity will remember that we did something without any purpose for our benefit for ourselves. But I am unpatriotic. With all the newspapers, all the editorials and all the articles, is people who talking about things pro-vax, not responding to the science of the 60,000 doctors who wrote the CDC, not responding to that, not responding to the FDA. Everybody have trials submitted. If the vaccine is so safe, was this secret? Make it public knowledge. Everything is on computers. Open it up. Why? Why? Who they protected? Well, I like how Michael said it. Money looks for a crevice, and there's no conscience in what crease it gets into to expand itself. Money have no conscience, and the investors and the big money that's behind and benefiting, this is the largest single transfer of wealth that has occurred on this planet ever. It's going to the fewest number of people, and it's being paid for by the largest number. And the secondary impact of all these nonsensical, moronic, unscientific jackassness that this and all of the other world governments are promoting doesn't make us unpatriotic, makes us more patriotic than anybody else. I'm unpatriotic because Al-Rawi, an attorney general, attorney, could put in the paper today that Roger is misguided. The man is a lunatic, he's a dodo head. How you could even say that? How you could utter those words? The man is concerned, he's genuinely trying to find a solution to a critical problem and disagreeing with the one that you come with. You go have the goal. I have no special for Roger. He hasn't said good things about me, and I don't care, frankly. But he is my brother. He is my brother, and he's fighting for the public interest for his whole life. So, regardless of what people say, he is my brother. So, number 8. There's a landlord relief program. Few people know about it. It's designed so nobody know about it. 80% of the people who ball in never heard of it. But who get in it? Is that a correct way? Where's the transparency? All these cabinet members. So you're going to just help your party supporters and starve out the opposition? I don't give a damn about any political party. It's the people we're supposed to protect, not the party. Landlord relief. 3,072 landlords received a rent. They say, but who monitoring the program? How we know that 75% of our money didn't get skittled out? Where's the accountability? Show me which accounting companies, Price Waterhouse, sitting on that committee to manage the disbursement. Who from the private sector, from the public sector, from NATUC? Why isn't there tripartite committees for everything when you're spending the people money? Is not yours, Rowley, but you're taking it as yours because you are the Ife of Ife. You are the royal king. The prime minister has spoken. So screw Anisette and NATUC. Screw the private sector. Screw all the people working with you for 25 years who give their lives to protect the state. Risk their lives in line of duty in the police and fire services. All of them disregarded. I know one of the officers that went in with Al-Rawi. They made several recommendations, but I read Al-Rawi after. He said nobody ain't coming no recommendations yet. Is that the respect and the discourse? I mean, I'm not interested in political party. This is the first battle that our country has ever had to fight. And I don't care what age, size, complexion, race, religion, all of us have to keep our minds together and understand that this is a conspiracy that is not founded in science. It's being promoted by people who just simply don't understand and who we must forgive. Do you know that the Ministry of Finance every couple of months gives a release of how much money he gave away? They have 2 different types of grants. They have the salary relief grant and the income support grant. And each of the grants are for different reasons. The one for the salary relief is who have a NIS. And the income support have no NIS. But too many questions arise when one begins to look into the data of how they're disbursing money. And one has to ask the question, why is NATUC protecting us? Why? But NATUC is the protector of the people. Why is it? How could we have allowed a national consciousness to develop a political framework where everybody in cabinet agree that NATUC is not to be included? You're afraid of UNC, but the UNC have people who believe in them. Why not let it be that the UNC could appoint an accounting firm of their choice and have that accountant have an overview of how the money is being dispersed. So when I look at the data, there's a disproportionate amount of money being spent in the minister's own statements and analysis. And I will share it with you. I have 3 pages of notes, but I don't want to, I could just tell you that there's no oversight as to who is receiving the landlord relief. What is the national graph for the neighborhoods? We could see by the voting in the sea of political allegiances by region, but let us overlap that with who is receiving those funds for salary relief. And account for me, show me publicly, what's the secret? You're giving 3,072 landlords. I am the one that called for the rental relief. But where's the accountability? How can we be sure that the money reaches? You're just weakening the procurement law to stop all corruption. And now you have data on the salary relief grant, where for the month of December, on December the 9th, the minister quotes that 14,445 persons were paid. And we know from the data that the amount that they are paid is $1,500 a month. That is
Could I ask you to I know there's a lot of information, but just in the interest of time, could we just close up and then, and we'll have to revisit this another time because there's really just too much for us to talk about. I mean, it's
all have to relax. And I just want to say that I am not here speaking on behalf of the Fishermen and Friends of the Sea. We have not had a meeting, and there's some variance of consensus, and I respect that. I respect within each union. There may just be 1 or 2 people in favor or against, but I admire the leadership that would defend and support the right of all persons to freedom, to self-preservation, to decisions that relate to their own spiritual and mental. And I thank you, but I'm very worried about the future of our country. The social dislocation, it's a declaration of war. They've declared war. They're going to starve out people. Unless we do something very quickly to mobilize a clear consensus of something. I'm willing to go and burn the Constitution if it will bring some publicity to the issue. I don't mind. I know where my heart is. And my heart is with the decisions that come out of people like those who are speaking here tonight. And I will follow. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. I know each speaker had so much to say because this is really a very, very serious issue facing the country. And, you know, as you said, Gary, we really need to act, you know, and so I'm really glad for you all to have come to this panel discussion to share your views and to explain it more to the national population, and so we could understand your point of views. And that is, once again, I want to thank General Secretary of NATUC, Michael Anisette, the second Vice President of the Trinidad and Tobago Registered Nurses Association, Letitia Cox, the UNC MP for Couva South and spokesperson for Labour, Rudranath Indar Singh, the Corporate Secretary of Fishermen and Friends of the Sea, Gary Abood, and Attorney at Law and UNC member, Brian Baig. Thank you all for your participation. I am sure it was very enlightening for me and also for the audience as well. So the checklist will be out. It should be out on Sunday, and we will have a summary of this as one of the articles. Thank you very much for you, our audience, for taking a look at this, and I look forward to seeing you next month. Thanks again to all our panelists and to you, the audience. Good night.